A convicted rapist is released from prison and then rapes again. But this time, he gets away with the crime because his DNA is not on file. And without this critical DNA, this case and thousands of other criminal cases will never be solved. This fight is being taken up by DNA for Africa. They are urging President Cyril Ramaphosa to urgently pass the Convicted Offenders Amendment Bill. Now, Vanessa Lynch, DNA for Africa's regional director, joins us now to discuss the issue further. Vanessa, good evening to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Why is this piece of legislation so important?
The importance of a national DNA database having a convicted offender index is not only because it's a deterrent. So once you have a convicted offender's profile on the DNA database, once they're released, there is a deterrent effect on committing further crimes. More importantly, they can actually link cold cases once that profile is being entered onto the database. So we've seen in the past where, for instance, McKee, another rapist who was convicted of a common assault, was actually linked to 30 unsolved rapes. And furthermore, if the convicted offender is released and goes back to crime, which we see so much of with the reoffending rate in South Africa, you can immediately identify who that person is. And from a constitutional perspective, our convicted offenders have, in fact, a limitation of their rights, yet their DNA samples aren't being taken. But an arrestee who hasn't yet been convicted still has to submit their sample. It's not balanced in terms of our constitution, and we need to address this.
When we look at examples from the rest of the world, and I think now of the Golden State Killer in the US, where it was Ancestry, and they used those Ancestry databases, and they've gone back and they're going through cold cases and linking people to those cases. Why is South Africa seemingly so far behind the rest of the world when it comes to DNA and our databases?
Well, Mel, I don't think that's necessarily true. You know, we have a DNA database, we have a DNA Act, and this provision, which originally allowed the police to take samples from convicted offenders and load them onto our DNA database, which is currently in existence, actually expired after 2 years. And the DNA Amendment Bill that is currently before Cabinet is to simply extend that provision. The only reason there was a limitation on the period of time within which to sample convicted offenders was because it was such an important population to put on our database that the Parliament at the time said, do this within 2 years, not realizing it wouldn't be done within 2 years. So even though there is a lot of hype around the Golden State Killer and the genealogy, we actually have a good forensic science laboratory, and we have a good DNA law, and we have an infrastructure that has the capacity we've seen in the past to identify serial offenders. But without this critical index being activated by the government once again, and without government continuing to fund our forensic science laboratories, we see these lags like DNA backlogs and convicted offenders being released. And that's why civil society is getting behind this now, to say, give us a reason why convicted offenders can be released without their samples being taken. 97,000 since 2017 convicted offenders have been released without their DNA sample having been taken.
Vanessa, if the president continues with the delays in terms of passing this bill, what would your next step be?
Well, the Action Society, which is a civil society group, has actually already taken steps. And what they've done is that they've issued a letter of demand to say, we believe that there should be, this amendment bill should be passed and brought urgently into law. And we've seen how quickly the government can pass laws through COVID. I mean, overnight, I believe, there was a soccer game and the regulations were changed overnight to allow, attendees to attend a soccer game. I mean, surely this is as important. So the next step for the Action Society, they issued this letter of demand. In 30 days, they didn't receive a response. And I believe they're taking the next steps. They're going to apply to court to have a decree to say that this is an irrational move in a way, that we have a database, we have a DNA Act, and we have this amendment bill that's awaiting promulgation, and basically asking the judiciary to either force the government to put this back into law, or for the government to come back and say, well, this is the reason, whatever that might be, that we don't want to pass this law.
It's a crucial issue, and we will continue to speak to you in the coming weeks and months about any developments that we do see. Vanessa, thank you so much for your time, Vanessa.